At the end of the Second World War, justice came swiftly for many high-ranking Nazi officers who had ordered or participated in atrocities. Among the first to face such justice was General Anton Dostler, a German officer who was executed by a firing squad in December 1945. His case was significant, not just for what he had done, but because it set a major legal precedent for future war crimes trials. Dostler's execution marked the first time an Axis general was held personally responsible for carrying out illegal orders, and it demonstrated that "I was only following orders" would no longer be an acceptable defence. Anton Dostler was born on May 10, 1891 in Munich, Germany. He joined the Imperial German Army in 1910 and served throughout the First World War, earning several decorations. After the war, he stayed in the military during the interwar years, and when Hitler came to power, Dostler's career advanced within the newly reorganised Wehrmacht. By the outbreak of the Second World War, Dostler was an experienced and capable officer. He held several staff and command positions throughout the war, eventually rising to the rank of General der Infanterie, the General of Infantry. In 1943, he commanded the 75th Army Corps, which operated in northern Italy, an area where German forces were struggling to maintain control after Italy had surrendered to the Allies. By March 1944, Italy was a chaotic battlefield. German troops occupied much of the north, while Allied forces had landed at Anzio and were fighting their way towards Rome. The German military command was increasingly paranoid about Allied saboteurs and partisans operating behind their lines. It was in this tense atmosphere that Dostler issued the order that would ultimately lead to his downfall. On March 22, 1944, 15 American soldiers from the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, the forerunner of the CIA, landed on the Italian coast near La Spezia as part of Operation Ginny 2. Their mission was to sabotage a railway tunnel used by German forces along the Ligurian coast. However, the operation went wrong almost immediately. The group was captured by Italian fascist troops who handed them over to the German military. When the captured men were interrogated, they identified themselves clearly as American soldiers in uniform, not spies. Under the Geneva Convention, that should have guaranteed them treatment as prisoners of war. However, Dostler decided otherwise. Dostler received reports of the captured Americans, and he contacted his superiors for guidance. At that time, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring commanded German forces in Italy. Kesselring referred Dostler to Hitler's infamous Commando Order, issued in 1942. That order, signed by Hitler himself, demanded that all Allied commandos and saboteurs captured behind German lines be executed immediately, even if they were wearing uniforms. The order explicitly stated that no prisoners were to be taken in such cases. Dostler, citing this directive, ordered that the 15 captured Americans be executed. Some of his subordinates protested, pointing out that the prisoners were clearly uniformed soldiers and that executing them would violate international law. Dostler insisted. He told his officers the Führer's order must be carried out. On March 26, 1944, just 4 days after their capture, the 15 Americans were lined up in front of a firing squad near La Spezia and shot. Their bodies were buried in a mass grave, which was later discovered by Allied troops after the war. When the war ended in May 1945, Dostler was captured by American forces in northern Italy. The US military quickly learned about the executions of the OSS men, and Dostler was charged with war crimes for ordering their deaths. His trial took place in Rome in October 1945 before an American military commission. This was one of the first major war crimes trials after the end of World War II, even before Nuremberg had got fully going. The evidence against Dostler was overwhelming. Documents were found showing he had approved the execution order. Surviving German officers testified that Dostler had been warned about the illegality of his actions, but went ahead anyway. Dostler's main defence was that he had been following orders from his superiors, the same superior orders defence that many Nazi officials would later use at Nuremberg. He argued that disobeying Hitler's orders would have led to his own execution, and that as a soldier he was duty-bound to follow commands from above. The court rejected this argument. The judge ruled that international law prohibited the execution of prisoners of war, and their officers were personally responsible for carrying out illegal orders. They declared that moral choice was still possible, even in the military hierarchy. On October 12, 1945, Anton Dostler was found guilty of war crimes and was sentenced to death by firing squad. Now, Anton Dostler's execution took place on December 1st, 1945 at Aversa near Naples, Italy. The site was a US military prison compound, and the execution was filmed by the US Army Signal Corps as a historical record, one of the few Nazi generals' executions ever captured on film. In this footage, Dostler is seen standing before a wooden post in the courtyard, wearing his military uniform. His hands are tied behind his back, and a white cloth is draped over his chest to mark the target area for the firing squad. Before the sentence was carried out, the charge and verdict were read aloud. Dostler, calm and composed, was given a blindfold. Witnesses said he faced the firing squad without flinching. The firing squad consisted of 12 American soldiers. After the order was given, they fired a volley at close range. Dostler slumped instantly. To ensure death, a medical officer confirmed that he was dead moments later. His body was then placed in a coffin and buried in an unmarked grave within the prison grounds. The Dostler case became a cornerstone for post-war international law. It established that military commanders could not escape responsibility for war crimes simply by claiming they were following superior orders. This principle was later codified during the Nuremberg trials under what became known as the Nuremberg Principle. Specifically, Principle 4 states, "The fact that a person acted pursuant to the order of his government or of a superior does not relieve him from responsibility under international law, providing a moral choice was in fact possible to him." The Dostler trial therefore served as a legal forerunner, a warning to future military leaders that they could not hide behind the chain of command when committing atrocities. The 15 executed Americans were eventually identified and reburied with military honours in the United States. Their deaths were officially recognised as a war crime, and Dostler's execution was seen as a small but significant act of justice. For Germany, the case was a grim example of how Hitler's orders had forced professional officers into committing illegal acts. For the Allies, it reinforced their commitment to holding individuals accountable, not entire nations, but the specific men who gave and carried out criminal commands. In historical perspective, Anton Dostler's name is not as widely known about as those of Himmler, Goering or Keitel, yet his trial set one of the most important precedents of the post-war era. It laid the groundwork for modern command responsibility, a legal doctrine still used today in international courts dealing with war crimes and crimes against humanity. The execution of Anton Dostler was not just the punishment of a single general, it was a statement to the world. His death symbolised the end of blind obedience to unlawful orders and the beginning of a new era of accountability under international law. On a cold December morning in 1945, Anton Dostler stood before an American firing squad, calm but condemned. A man who had chosen to obey an immoral command. The shots that rang out in Aversa were not only the end of his life, but the beginning of a new legal order that would define the post-war world. One where justice reached even those who claimed they were simply following orders. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.